1966, psychologists Jonathan Friedman and Scott Fraser conducted a deeply unsettling experiment on the streets of California. They discovered that human submission is not achieved through aggressive coercion, but through microscopic, seemingly harmless concessions. They asked homeowners to display a massive, poorly lettered public service billboard on their front lawns. Normally, 83% of residents understandably refused, but a specific group had a staggering 76% compliance rate. Why? Because 2 weeks earlier, they had been asked to display a tiny 3-inch safe driving sign in their windows. That one trivial concession fundamentally altered their self-image. They no longer saw themselves as independent operators. They had been psychologically reprogrammed into compliant, public-spirited citizens. In the dark psychology of human interaction, every single time you apologize for setting a boundary, you are making that exact same microscopic concession. You think you are just being polite. You think you are smoothing over an uncomfortable moment. But elite manipulators know the brutal truth. You are rewriting your own identity into a submissive pawn. Listen carefully. The unspoken rules of social hierarchies are shifting. The window of opportunity to build an impenetrable psychological armor against emotional parasites is closing fast. What I am about to reveal in this classified briefing is not public knowledge. It is a highly guarded breakdown of how covert predators use your desperate need for approval to dismantle your defenses and keep you trapped at the bottom. If you choose to click away right now, you guarantee that your internal power, your time, and your status will remain drained by toxic individuals who view your apologies as free, exploitable labor. But if you stay until the very end, I will hand you the exact psychological blueprint to weaponize your boundaries and command undeniable respect. Let us get one thing straight. Nobody respects a willing victim. You were programmed to believe that apologizing for your limits makes you a good person. Elite operators call it pure cowardice. The trap of the uninvited debt. Let us examine the exact architecture of the unforced concession. Sociologist Alvin Goodner proved that every human society on Earth is governed by the rule of reciprocation, a massive, invisible web of indebtedness. When someone gives us something, we feel a suffocating obligation to repay them. Covert manipulators understand this flawlessly. They weaponize the concept of uninvited debts to keep you compliant. In a famous experiment at Cornell University, an assistant named Joe bought unsuspecting subjects an uninvited bottle of Coca-Cola. Later, when Joe asked them to buy expensive raffle tickets, the subjects who received the uninvited favor bought twice as many tickets, driven entirely by the crushing weight of the uninvited debt. Manipulators use this exact same framework when you set a boundary. They will often manufacture a fake emotional crisis or offer a fabricated compromise, presenting it as a gift of their deep understanding. They expect you to reciprocate that fake gift by softening your boundary. And because you are terrified of looking arrogant or rigid, you fall right into the trap. You issue an apology. You say you are sorry for being so harsh. That apology is not a polite social grace. It is a psychological surrender. In that exact moment, you have handed the predator the judge's gavel. By apologizing, you are implicitly admitting that your boundary is an offense, a transgression that requires their forgiveness. You are telling them that their temporary discomfort is vastly more important than your permanent respect. Ignorance of this Machiavellian tactic ensures your permanent status as an obedient secondary option. Perceptual contrast principle. To keep you permanently trapped in this cycle of over-explaining and apologizing, social predators deploy the perceptual contrast principle. Retail clothiers use this principle to manipulate consumers every single day. They will always sell a man a highly expensive $500 suit first. Once he has committed to the massive purchase, the $90 sweater presented immediately afterward looks incredibly cheap by comparison. Human beings judge the worth of an event based entirely on what immediately preceded it. Social predators use this exact same psychological contrast against your boundaries. First, they act like an absolute tyrant. They ignore your limits, belittle your rules, or dramatically disrespect your time. Then, the exact moment you get angry and draw a hard line, they instantly switch their demeanor. They soften their voice. They act hurt, misunderstood, and emotionally fragile. They look at you with fake confusion. Because the contrast between their previous aggression and their current fragility is so blinding, it tricks your mind. The manipulator's sudden performance makes your perfectly reasonable boundary look like an act of extreme cruelty. You think you are being too harsh, so you rush to apologize. You drop your defenses to buy the psychological equivalent of the cheap sweater. entirely missing the fact that both the aggressive tyrant and the fragile victim are the exact same predator playing you for a fool. Elite operators never fall for the contrast trap. They recognize that a boundary is non-negotiable, regardless of the theatrical performance that follows it. The fortress of foolish consistency. Why is it so impossibly hard to hold a boundary in absolute silence? Prominent theorists like Leon Festinger uncovered that humans have a nearly obsessive desire to appear consistent with their past actions. Once we make a choice or adopt a social role, we encounter massive personal pressures to behave consistently with that commitment. When you were young, society forced you to adopt the role of the peacemaker, the agreeable friend, the accommodating employee. You made a strict commitment to that identity. Now, you are sealed within the fortress walls of rigid consistency. When you finally muster the courage to set a boundary, it creates massive psychological friction. It contradicts your lifelong role. To relieve that unbearable friction, you immediately apologize. You try to bridge the gap between your new boundary and your old, submissive identity. The need for consistency acts as a shield against the harsh reality of social power dynamics. You apologize not out of true empathy, but because you are utterly terrified of breaking your own submissive pattern. You are a prisoner of your own past concessions. Every time you apologize to smooth over the friction, you are broadcasting to the predator that you lack the cold rationality to enforce your own rules. In the game of power, predictability is social death, and your endless apologies make your reactions entirely predictable. You must realize that consistency to a weak identity is a flaw, not a virtue. Pluralistic ignorance and predators. When you apologize for your boundaries, you are actively creating false social proof against yourself. Researchers Bibb Latané and John Darley uncovered a terrifying phenomenon called pluralistic ignorance. When people are in an ambiguous emergency situation, they look around at the actions of others to decide what is correct. In a famous incident in New York City, 38 witnesses watched a brutal attack for over half an hour, and not a single person called the police. Why? Because everyone looked at everyone else, saw that nobody was reacting with panic, and automatically assumed it was a non-emergency. The inaction of the crowd generated lethal social proof. Covert manipulators use this exact principle to test your emotional armor. When they casually step over your line, they watch your reaction very closely. They are looking for social evidence of what is acceptable. If you set a boundary, but immediately soften it with a nervous smile and a long, drawn-out apology, you are generating toxic social proof. You are teaching the predator that their disrespectful behavior is completely acceptable. They learn from your own submissive reaction that your boundary is an illusion, a non-emergency. You think you are being the bigger person by avoiding a harsh confrontation, but in the dark reality of social hierarchies, you are actively validating their disrespect. If you do not react with cold, unflinching consequences, the predator's mind registers your apology as absolute permission to destroy your leverage further. Elite operators understand that the true power of a boundary lies in the psychological reactance it generates. Psychologist Jack Brame developed reactance theory to explain the human response to diminishing personal control. Whenever free choice is limited or threatened, the need to retain our freedoms makes us desire them significantly more than previously. We see this vividly when local governments ban certain products. Citizens immediately hoard the banned item and suddenly rate it as vastly superior to any alternative. When a freedom is restricted, human beings desire it obsessively. When you set a firm, uncompromising boundary, you are severely restricting the predator's access to your time, your energy, and your presence. According to reactance theory, this sudden scarcity instantly makes your attention vastly more valuable. They will want your validation more than ever before. But when you apologize, you completely destroy this psychological advantage. You signal that the restriction is temporary, that your doors are still open, and that you are desperate for them to stay. You ruin the extreme scarcity of your presence. The individuals who command the highest status in any hierarchy are those who weaponize reactance. They guard their focus as if their life depends on it, because socially it does. They establish the boundary and let the restriction stand, refusing to dilute its power with a single word of regret. They know that people only respect what is exceptionally difficult to obtain. The rejection then retreat tactic. Let us look at how the rejection then retreat technique is used to dismantle your boundaries piece by piece. In the psychology of persuasion, a negotiator will often start with an extreme demand that they know you will refuse. Once you reject the massive demand, they gracefully retreat to a smaller, moderate request. Because they appear to have made a concession, the rule of reciprocation forces you to make a concession of your own, leading you to agree to a demand you would have otherwise rejected. This was the exact psychological framework that allowed the catastrophic Watergate break-in to be approved. The initial plan was an outrageous $1 million proposal, so the revised $250,000 plan looked like a reasonable concession. When you set a boundary, a covert manipulator will intentionally push against it with an extreme emotional reaction. They will act deeply offended or outrageously demanding. When you stand firm against the extreme reaction, they will suddenly retreat, asking for just a tiny explanation, just a small compromise, just a brief apology to clear the air. If you give them that apology, you have fallen for the rejection then retreat tactic. You have made a concession. You have negotiated away your sovereignty. The truly powerful recognize this trick instantly. They deploy a psychological maneuver of redefinition. They define the manipulator's sudden hurt feelings not as a genuine emotional crisis, but as a highly calculated compliance tactic. Once you perceive their demand for an apology as a manipulative trick rather than a real injury, you owe them absolutely nothing. A trick does not deserve your apology. The ultimate psychological transformation requires you to master the dark art of ruthless confrontation. For decades, the famous Milgram experiments at Yale University showed that ordinary people would blindly obey the symbols of authority, delivering maximum electric shocks to a screaming victim simply because a researcher in a grey lab coat told them to do so. They unhooked their professional intelligence and blindly obeyed authority. By constantly apologizing for your own rules and boundaries, you have handed the manipulators the lab coat. You have made them the absolute authority over your reality, and you are blindly obeying their unspoken demand that you remain small, agreeable, and submissive. You must rip that title away from them today. You must build an impenetrable armor of indifference. The greatest operators in the world do not waste a single heartbeat trying to make a parasite feel comfortable with a boundary. They understand that social friction is not something to be feared. It is the exact tool used to command instant, undeniable respect. When you stop being the submissive explainer and start being the ruthless dictator of your own life, the manipulators will panic. They will call you cold, arrogant, and selfish. That is the beautiful sound of the emotional parasite starving to death. We have reached the critical point of this briefing. I want you to analyze your own behavior right now. What was the exact moment you realized that explaining and apologizing for your boundaries was actually destroying your authority? Answer this in the comments below. If this painful truth hit you exactly where it needed to, and you are finally ready to embrace the friction, drop the words zero IGITS in the comments right now to prove you are killing the need to apologize today. Take back your power. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to master the dark psychology and warfare tactics the elite use to dominate every hierarchy. Stay cold, stay silent, and never apologize for your power.